At midnight, my stepfather broke into my army quarters, dislocating my shoulder and leaving me bloodied, while my mother watched in silence. I sent an SOS, then collapsed. What followed stunned even the military. This is a story I never thought I'd live to tell, a brutal truth about family, betrayal, and finding strength in the most unexpected places. Just 3 months ago, I was lying broken, my shoulder dislocated, blood covering my body, as my own mother watched, her eyes empty, while my stepfather tried to beat me to death in my own home. My childhood, for a while, was a scene straight out of a storybook. I'm Candace, 27 now, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, but back then, I was just a little girl in a small Ohio town. My mom was an elementary school teacher, my dad an engineer, and we lived in a cozy 2-story house with a backyard where he built me a treehouse. Weekends were filled with the simple magic of bike rides, homemade cookies, and board games by the fireplace. I was their only child, soaked in unconditional love and attention. It felt like nothing could ever shatter our perfect world. Then, one rainy Tuesday in October, when I was 12, it did. My dad was driving home when a truck lost control and crashed into his car. He died instantly. I still remember the police officers at our door, their solemn faces as they delivered the news that ripped our lives apart. Mom collapsed to the floor, her screams still echo in my worst nightmares. The months that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, sympathetic cards, and casseroles from neighbors that piled up in the fridge. Mom stopped teaching, barely leaving her bed. At just 12 years old, I became the caretaker, making sandwiches, doing laundry, trying to keep our fractured home together. Financial problems hit hard. Dad's life insurance wasn't enough, and soon, bills with red past due stamps piled up. Mom started selling furniture, then jewelry, just to keep our house. Her depression deepened, and I'd often find her staring at old photographs, silent tears streaming down her face. 2 years later, when I was 14, Frank entered our lives. He came to fix our leaking roof, a referral from a neighbor who knew we were struggling. Frank was tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that seemed to breathe life back into my mother. He'd fix things around the house for free, bring groceries, and for the first time since Dad died, he made Mom laugh. At first, I was so grateful. Frank felt like the answer to our prayers. He took us out to dinner, helped Mom with paperwork, even bought me school supplies. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely seemed to care. 6 months after they met, Frank proposed. The wedding was small, a quiet courthouse ceremony, but Mom looked genuinely happy in her cream-colored suit. Frank moved in that same day. The changes started subtly. Frank suggested Mom quit her part-time library job because he could support us. He offered to handle all the finances since Mom found them stressful. He mentioned our extended family only called when they needed something, so maybe we should limit those interactions. Within months, Mom had no access to our bank accounts. She had to ask Frank for money for groceries. Our visits to Grandma became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Frank claimed gas prices were too high. That's when I saw his two personalities. To neighbors and friends, he was generous, funny, the perfect husband. At home, he was controlling, easily angered, and relentlessly critical. He'd nitpick Mom constantly, her cooking, her appearance. If dinner was late, he'd throw his plate in the sink. If she bought something without asking, he'd lecture her for hours about financial responsibility. The worst part was watching Mom change. The woman who once fiercely defended her students became someone who flinched at loud noises. She started checking with Frank before making any decision, no matter how small. She lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her diminishing frame, and the spark in her eyes faded completely. By the time I was 16, our home had transformed into a prison of walking on eggshells. Frank never hit Mom, at least not that I saw, but his emotional abuse was constant and devastating. He isolated her, controlled her every move, and slowly convinced her she was worthless without him. One evening, when Frank was out, I confronted Mom while we were washing dishes. I asked her why she let him treat her that way. She turned to me with vacant eyes and said, "He keeps a roof over our heads, Candace. Not everyone gets second chances at love." Sometimes you have to accept the bad with the good. Those words haunted me. What bad was she accepting that I didn't see? What happened behind closed doors when I was at school? The questions kept me awake at night, especially as Frank started directing his criticism toward me. My grades were never good enough, my chores never done to his standards. He called me ungrateful for living in his house, eating his food. He began limiting my time with friends, claiming they were bad influences. When a college brochure arrived in the mail, he simply threw it away, saying college was a waste of money for girls who would just get married anyway. The tension in our house grew thicker with each passing month. Mom became the mediator, always trying to smooth things over. Just do what he asks, she'd whisper when he was out of earshot. It's easier that way. By my senior year of high school, I knew I had to escape. Frank had made it clear he expected me to stay home after graduation, get a local job, and contribute. Mom needed me, he said. But the real truth was, he needed another person to control, another way to tighten his grip on our family. I watched Mom disappear more each day, becoming a shell of the woman who had once taught me to stand up for myself. The irony was crushing. How could I honor her earlier lessons while watching her surrender her own power? That question burned inside me, fueling a fierce determination to find a way out, not just for myself, but eventually, for her too. My high school graduation day should have been a celebration. Instead, it was steeped in tension. Frank complained about the ceremony's length, the cost of the cap and gown, the waste of printing diplomas. Mom smiled weakly and took photos, but her hands trembled as she tried to adjust my tassel. The real confrontation came that evening. Frank waited until we were home, his forced smiles for neighbors long gone. He sat at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of him. "I found a job for you at the warehouse where my buddy works," he announced. $8 an hour, starts Monday. You'll give half your paycheck for room and board here." I stood frozen, staring at the employment forms he had already partially filled out. I was thinking about college, maybe community college first. Frank laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the kitchen tiles. "With what money? Your mother and I aren't wasting our savings on that. Besides, your mother needs help around here." I looked at Mom, desperate for support, but she just stared at the floor. This was the moment I realized I would never get out if I followed Frank's plan. I would be trapped, watching my mother deteriorate, slowly becoming just like her, my own spirit crushed under his control. The next day, I went to school to pick up my final transcript. Mrs. Lawson, my guidance counselor, noticed my red eyes and invited me into her office. Something about her kindness broke the dam I had built around my emotions, and I told her everything, the words pouring out like a flash flood. She listened without interrupting, then rolled her chair to a filing cabinet. "Have you ever considered the military, Candace?" she asked, pulling out a stack of brochures. "It could give you distance, education benefits, and a fresh start." I had never thought about it. My image of the military was all buzz cuts and push-ups from movies. But as Mrs. Lawson laid out the benefits, something clicked. The military would provide immediate physical distance from Frank. It offered housing, a steady income, and educational opportunities. Most importantly, it provided a legitimate reason to leave that even Frank would have trouble arguing against. For the next week, I researched extensively. I read about basic training, different branches, job specialties, and veterans' experiences. I learned about the GI Bill, tuition assistance, and how many service members completed degrees while on active duty. This wasn't just an escape plan. It could be the foundation for the future I wanted. The Army recruiter, Sergeant Jenkins, was straightforward when I visited the office. He didn't sugarcoat the challenges or make false promises. "It's hard work," he said. "But if you're committed, it can change your life trajectory completely." I signed the enlistment papers without telling Frank. Mom was with me, a surprising act of defiance on her part. She cried as I completed the paperwork, a complex mixture of pride and fear in her eyes. "I'll be okay, Mom," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "And once I'm settled, we can figure things out for you, too." She squeezed my hand, but said nothing. We both knew what figuring things out meant, and we both knew it wouldn't be easy. Telling Frank was every bit as explosive as I anticipated. I waited until dinner, my enlistment papers safely stored at Mrs. Lawson's house in case he tried to destroy them. I joined the army today, I announced during a rare moment of silence at the dinner table. I ship out for basic training in 3 weeks. Frank's face turned a dangerous shade of red. The fork in his hand clattered against the plate. You did what? Without my permission. She doesn't need your permission, Frank, Mom said softly, surprising both of us. She's 18. What followed was the worst argument our house had ever seen. Frank threw his plate against the wall, shattering it into pieces that scattered across the linoleum like shrapnel. He called me ungrateful, stupid, and rebellious. He threatened to throw me out immediately with nothing but the clothes on my back. Throughout his tirade, I remained calm, which only infuriated him more. For the first time, I saw his rage for what it was, the tantrum of a man who controlled others because he couldn't control himself. This realization was strangely empowering. I was making the right choice. The following weeks were unbearable. Frank alternated between ignoring me completely and making snide comments about soldiers returning in body bags. Mom tried to mediate, but her attempts only redirected his anger toward her. I packed secretly, hiding small bundles of belongings at a friend's house so Frank wouldn't notice items missing. The night before I left, Frank cornered me in the hallway. His breath reeked of whiskey, his eyes narrowed to slits. You think you're so smart running off to play soldier? He hissed. Mark my words, Candace. You will regret this. And when you come crawling back, don't expect any sympathy. I pushed past him, my heart hammering in my chest. I will never come back to this house while you are in it, I replied, finally giving voice to the thought I had kept inside for years. That night, I barely slept. I thought about Mom, alone with him after I left. I wrote her a letter with information about domestic violence resources and hid it in her gardening book, the one place Frank would never look. It felt woefully inadequate, but it was all I could do for now. The next morning, a friend's mother drove me to the processing station. Mom hugged me goodbye at the front door, slipping a small envelope into my pocket. I'm proud of you, she whispered. You're so brave, just like your father. Frank stood in the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. His silence was more menacing than any threat could have been. As the car pulled away, I looked back at our house one last time. Mom stood small and fragile on the porch, Frank's hand gripping her shoulder. The image burned into my memory like a brand, a reminder of why I needed to succeed, not just for myself, but for her too. In the envelope, I found a faded photo of Dad in his college graduation gown and a short note from Mom. He would be so proud of the woman you have become. Stay strong. I love you. The words gave me both comfort and determination as I headed toward an uncertain future, leaving behind the only home I had ever known. Basic training was exactly as challenging as Sergeant Jenkins had warned me it would be. The first night, lying in a bunk, surrounded by strangers, I questioned my decision. The drill sergeants were intimidating, the physical demands overwhelming, and homesickness hit harder than expected. Not homesickness for the house I had left, but for the mother I had abandoned to Frank's mercies. But as days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. My body grew stronger with each grueling physical training session. My mind sharpened under the pressure of having to learn vast amounts of information quickly. Most surprisingly, I found a sense of belonging among my fellow recruits. These women came from all backgrounds, all with their own reasons for joining. Some sought education benefits, others adventure or family tradition. A few, like me, were running from something. We bonded through shared hardship, forming connections that felt more genuine than any I had experienced in years. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez was particularly influential. She was tough but fair, demanding excellence while providing the tools to achieve it. One evening, after I struggled through an obstacle course, she pulled me aside. You've got more in you, Martinez, she said, using my last name as was custom. Stop holding back. Whatever you're running from cannot catch you if you run faster and stronger. Her words struck a chord. I had been holding back, afraid to fully commit to this new life, because part of me still felt tethered to my old one. After that conversation, I threw myself completely into training, finishing in the top 15% of my class. Graduation day was bittersweet. I scanned the crowd of proud families, knowing no one had come for me. Mom had promised to try, but I received a text the night before. Frank sick. Cannot leave him. So proud of you. Send pictures. It was disappointing, but not surprising. I posed for a solo photo in my uniform, sending it to Mom with a cheerful message that masked my hurt. After completing advanced individual training, where I specialized in logistics, I received orders to Fort Lewis in Washington State, about as far from Ohio as possible within the continental United States. The distance was both a relief and a worry. I would be free from any surprise visits from Frank, but also unable to check on Mom easily. My first apartment off base was tiny but mine. A studio with just enough room for a bed, desk, and small kitchen table. For the first time in my life, I controlled my own space. No one commented on how I arranged my furniture or criticized my choice of decorations. No one monitored my comings and goings or questioned my spending. This small freedom was intoxicating. Work provided structure and purpose. I excelled in my role, coordinating supply shipments, earning a reputation for efficiency and attention to detail. My superiors noticed, and promotions came steadily. Each one increased my sense of self-worth, erasing years of Frank's belittlement. The most transformative aspect, however, was the friendships I formed. My battle buddy, Sarah, became the sister I never had, a tough-talking woman from Texas with 3 brothers. She took no nonsense from anyone and taught me to do the same. Together with our friend group, we explored Seattle on weekends, went hiking in the stunning Washington wilderness, and created the family we chose rather than the ones we were born into. 2 years into my service, I reached the rank of specialist and had saved enough money to take college courses online. My commander supported my educational goals, adjusting my schedule when possible to accommodate exams. Every completed credit felt like another brick in the wall I was building between my past and future. Communication with Mom became increasingly difficult. At first, we spoke weekly, though always when Frank was out of the house. Her calls grew less frequent, her texts more cryptic. Sometimes weeks passed with no contact at all. 3 years into my Army career, I received a promotion to sergeant. The ceremony was small but meaningful, with my unit present to witness this milestone. That night, I called Mom to share the news, but Frank answered. His voice, slurred from drinking, triggered an automatic tension in my shoulders. Well, if it isn't the soldier girl, he sneered, calling to brag about playing dress-up with guns. I nearly hung up, but forced myself to stay calm. May I speak with Mom, please? She's busy taking care of me like a good wife should, unlike some ungrateful brats who abandon their family. Before I could respond, I heard a commotion in the background. Then Mom's voice, breathless, Candace, is that you, honey? Yeah, Mom, it's me. I got promoted to sergeant today. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. Her voice sounded thin, strained. I'm so proud of you. Frank shouted something unintelligible in the background. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. I can't talk long. He's having a bad day. Mom, are you okay? Has he hurt you? No, nothing like that. The denial came too quickly. Just stress. His business is struggling, and you know how he gets when he's worried about money. We talked for a few more minutes, but it was clear she was afraid to speak freely. As we said goodbye, she added, I miss you, Candace, more than you know. That call haunted me for weeks. The fear in her voice, the careful way she chose her words, the background noises of Frank's anger, all pointed to a situation deteriorating in my absence. I began receiving strange, cryptic texts from Mom at odd hours. Remember where we hid your dad's fishing gear? The neighbor's dog got loose again today. Messages that made no sense unless they were coded communications. I tried calling when I received these texts, but she rarely answered. My unit noticed the change in me. Sarah, in particular, pressed for details, recognizing the signs of distress I tried to hide. One night, after a particularly worrying text from Mom, I confided everything to Sarah: the history with Frank, Mom's increasing isolation, my growing fear that verbal abuse had escalated to physical. You need to check on her, Sarah said firmly. Request leave. I'll cover for you if needed. What if going there makes it worse for her? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if not going does? Sarah countered. After another month of disturbing messages, including a photo of Mom with what looked like a poorly concealed bruise near her eye, I requested 2 weeks of leave. My commander, aware of my otherwise spotless record and dedication, approved it without question. The night before my flight to Ohio, I received one last text from Mom. Please don't come. He knows and is very angry. I will be fine. It only strengthened my resolve. I packed light, bringing just one small suitcase, and boarded the plane with a mixture of determination and dread. As the aircraft lifted off, I gazed out at the mountains surrounding Seattle, wondering if I was flying toward a confrontation that would finally free my mother, or one that would make everything infinitely worse for both of us. Either way, I could no longer stand by from a distance. It was time to face the monster who had infiltrated our home and destroyed our peace. The taxi from the airport dropped me off a block from my childhood home. I wanted to observe before announcing my presence, a strategic decision, one I had learned from military training. Always assess the situation before engaging. The house looked different than I remembered. The once cheerful yellow paint had faded to a sickly beige. Dad's carefully tended flower beds were now overrun with weeds. The porch swing where we used to read together was gone, leaving only the hooks in the ceiling as a reminder of happier times. I approached slowly, my heart pounding as if I were entering hostile territory, which in many ways, I was. Before I could knock, the door opened. Mom stood there, thinner than I remembered, her once vibrant brown hair now streaked with gray. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm spring weather. "Candace," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously over my shoulder. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to, Mom," I replied, stepping forward to embrace her. She flinched slightly before accepting my hug, her body rigid in my arms. Inside, the house smelled musty, as if windows were rarely opened to let in fresh air. Family photos that once lined the hallway had been replaced with generic landscape prints. No evidence of my existence remained on the walls. "Frank will be home from work in 2 hours," Mom said, ushering me quickly into the kitchen. "You can't stay here. He said if you ever came back, he wouldn't be responsible for his actions." "Is that a threat, Mom? Has he hurt you?" I asked directly, gesturing to her long sleeves. No, she said too quickly. "I'm just clumsy lately. Getting older. You know how it is." "I'm 23, Mom. I don't know how it is to be clumsy from age." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "Please show me your arms." After a moment of hesitation, she slowly rolled up her right sleeve. Purple bruises in various stages of healing marked her pale skin. Finger-shaped bruises, unmistakable in their origin. "He didn't mean it," she said quickly, covering up again. "He lost his contracting job 3 months ago. The stress makes him drink, and when he drinks, he gets upset. It's not his fault." "Mom, listen to yourself," I pleaded. "You're making excuses for someone who hurts you. This is classic abuse. You taught elementary school. You know the signs. You probably reported parents for doing exactly what Frank is doing to you." She turned away, busying herself with making tea. We both knew she was too nervous to drink. "It's not that simple, Candace. Where would I go? I have no money of my own, no job for years, no friends left. You could come with me right now. We could pack a bag and be gone before he gets home." She shook her head adamantly. "He would find us. He checks my phone, my emails. He has friends everywhere. And he said if I ever tried to leave." Her voice trailed off, the unfinished threat hanging in the air between us. We were interrupted by the sound of a car in the driveway. Mom's face drained of color. "He's early," she whispered, panic evident in her voice. Frank burst through the door moments later. He had aged since I last saw him, his once robust frame now thicker around the middle, his face ruddier. His eyes narrowed when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table. Well, the soldier returns," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "To what do we owe this honor?" "Just visiting my mother," I replied evenly, years of military discipline helping me maintain composure. "Your mother," he emphasized the word mockingly, "has been doing just fine without your concern for 5 years. Suddenly you care." I have always cared, I countered. And I have always worried about her being here with you. Frank's face darkened, but before he could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. It was Mrs. Winters from next door, bringing over a casserole. Frank transformed instantly, his scowl replaced by a charming smile. "Barbara, how thoughtful of you," he gushed, taking the dish. "And look who surprised us today. Our Candace is back from playing soldier." Mrs. Winters smiled warmly at me. "Oh my, let me look at you. So grown up and serving our country. Your parents must be so proud." I noticed how Frank positioned himself as my parent, how easily the neighbor accepted this narrative. It was a small glimpse into how he had rewritten our family story for the community, presenting himself as the caring stepfather rather than the abuser he truly was. After Mrs. Winters left, Frank's mask dropped immediately. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he hissed. "After all I've done for you and your mother." "All you've done?" I challenged, rising to my feet. "You mean isolating her from family, controlling every aspect of her life, leaving bruises on her arms?" Frank took a threatening step toward me. "You watch your mouth in my house." "This is not your house," I shot back. "This is my father's house. The mortgage is still in Mom's name. You're just a parasite living off her." His hand twitched at his side, and I knew he was considering striking me. Let him try, I thought. I wasn't a frightened teenager anymore, but a trained soldier. The awareness must have shown in my stance, because he pulled back, changing tactics. "Your mother," he said with exaggerated patience, "is a grown woman who makes her own choices. Tell her, Linda. Tell your daughter how happy you are with our life together." Mom looked between us, clearly terrified of choosing sides. "We manage fine, Candace." "Really?" I knew then that I wouldn't be able to convince her to leave. At least not today. The psychological hold Frank had on her was too strong to break in one conversation. I needed to gather more evidence, contact local resources, and create a safer exit plan. "I'm staying at the Holiday Inn," I told her, ignoring Frank completely. "I'll be here for 2 weeks. My cell number is the same if you need anything, day or night." "She won't need anything from you," Frank interjected. "Now I think it's time for you to leave." I stood my ground. "I would like to take Mom to lunch tomorrow." "Alone." "That's not happening," Frank snapped. "Actually," I said calmly, reaching into my pocket. I took the liberty of documenting those bruises on Mom's arms when she showed me earlier. "I have a friend in the local police department who would be very interested to see these photos if Mom doesn't meet me tomorrow." It was a bluff, but Frank didn't know that. His face contorted with rage, but he was cornered. "Fine. Lunch. 1 hour. That's it." I hugged Mom goodbye, whispering in her ear, "Pack a small emergency bag. Hide it somewhere he won't look, just in case." As I walked to the door, Frank followed closely. "You always were a troublemaker," he said quietly, so Mom couldn't hear. "But you're playing a dangerous game now. I protected your mother when you abandoned her. Remember that." His words were meant to induce guilt, but they only strengthened my resolve. "Threatening a United States Army sergeant is unwise, Frank," I replied, keeping my voice low. "I am not the helpless girl who left here 5 years ago. Remember that." The next day, Mom met me at a small cafe downtown. Frank drove her there and waited in the parking lot, a not-so-subtle reminder of his control. She was nervous, picking at her food and checking the time constantly. "Mom, I need you to be honest with me," I said gently. "How bad is it, really?" After several denials, the truth finally emerged in fragments. Frank had lost his job months ago, but hid it from neighbors and friends. He spent days drinking and nights taking his frustrations out on Mom. The verbal abuse had escalated to pushing, then hitting. She had visited the emergency room twice, giving excuses of falling downstairs or tripping over rugs. "Why do you stay?" I asked, though I knew the complex answer before she spoke. "Where would I go?" she replied, echoing her words from the day before. "He controls all our money. He checks the mileage on the car. He monitors my phone. And he has promised that if I ever try to leave." She couldn't finish the sentence. I outlined a plan for her, women's shelters that could hide her, legal resources for protection orders, the possibility of staying with me temporarily until she found her footing. She listened but remained unconvinced. I'll think about it, she said finally as our hour ended. But please, Candace, don't confront him again. It only makes things worse for me when you leave. Those words hit me like a physical blow. She was right. My visit, while well-intentioned, had likely destabilized an already volatile situation. I had no guarantee that I could protect her once I returned to base. Over the next few days, I gathered information discreetly. I spoke with local domestic violence advocates, documented what I could of Mom's situation, and even consulted with a lawyer about her rights to the house. I created a comprehensive escape plan, printing resources on papers small enough for Mom to hide. 5 days into my leave, I arranged another meeting with Mom at the cafe. This time, Frank didn't wait in the parking lot, which immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. He found the domestic violence brochure you slipped into my purse, Mom said as soon as she sat down, her voice trembling. He was waiting up when I got home from seeing you. He searched my things and found it. Did he hurt you? I demanded, already knowing the answer from the concealer poorly hiding a bruise on her cheekbone. It doesn't matter, she insisted. What matters is that you need to stop. He knows what you're doing, and he said next time it will be worse. Mom, this is exactly why you need to leave him. He's threatening you, hurting you. This will escalate until... I couldn't bring myself to finish the thought. You don't understand, she said, tears forming in her eyes. He said if I try to leave, he will hurt you. He has been following you, Candace. He knows where you are staying. He said soldiers can have accidents, too. Cold fear settled in my stomach, not fear for myself, but the chilling realization that Frank was even more dangerous than I had believed. His threats had expanded to include me, which meant he was growing desperate and unpredictable. I need to go, Mom said suddenly, gathering her purse. He only gave me 30 minutes this time. He's waiting around the corner. Mom, please, I begged, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. I love you, Candace. That's why I need you to go back to your base where you are safe. Please just go. I will be fine. I watched helplessly as she hurried out of the cafe, looking over her shoulder repeatedly. The weight of failure pressed down on me. I had come to rescue her, but had only made her situation more perilous. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Leave town tonight or your mother pays the price. This is your only warning. Minutes later, the hotel room phone rang. But when I answered, there was only breathing on the other end before the line went dead. I called Mom immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried the house phone with the same result. Panic rising, I contacted the local police to request a welfare check, only to receive a call an hour later informing me that everything appeared fine at the residence. Frank had answered the door, explaining that my mother was resting and that I was an estranged daughter causing problems. Without evidence of immediate danger, there was nothing more the police could do. I felt completely powerless, caught in Frank's web of manipulation and threats. The next morning, I made the difficult decision to return to base early, not out of fear for myself, but because my presence was putting Mom in greater danger. I left the comprehensive resource packet with the hotel concierge to deliver to Mom's workplace, the only place Frank didn't monitor constantly. As my plane took off, I gazed down at the Ohio landscape with a heavy heart. I had failed in my mission to rescue Mom, but I had gathered critical intelligence about the enemy. Frank was escalating, becoming more dangerous. This was not a retreat, but a strategic withdrawal. I would regroup, consult with legal experts on base, and develop a more effective intervention plan. What I didn't know, as I flew back to Washington, was that Frank had already set his own plan in motion, one that would bring the battlefield directly to my door. I returned to Fort Lewis with a heavy heart, but a determined mind. The first thing I did was brief Sarah on everything that had happened in Ohio. As my closest friend and battle buddy, she understood both the personal and tactical aspects of my situation. We need to get official resources involved, she advised as we sat in my apartment the evening of my return. The Family Advocacy Program can help coordinate with civilian authorities in your hometown. I nodded, already planning my next steps. I'll make an appointment tomorrow. I also want to consult with the legal office about what kind of restraining order Mom could get and how to enforce it across state lines. What I didn't share with Sarah was the nagging fear that Frank might follow through on his threats against me. It seemed unlikely he would travel across the country, but his parting words had carried a conviction that unsettled me. The following week passed in a blur of appointments and research. I spoke with family advocacy specialists, legal advisors, and even a counselor about strategies for helping abuse victims who were reluctant to leave. Everyone was sympathetic and offered resources, but the consistent message was frustrating. We couldn't force Mom to accept help if she wasn't ready. My communications with Mom had become even more restricted. She responded to my texts with brief, non-committal messages that felt monitored. Our one phone call was so clearly supervised by Frank that we could only exchange pleasantries about the weather and my work, nothing about her safety or well-being. 7 days after my return to base, I was beginning to believe Frank's threats had been empty, designed only to drive me away from Ohio. I settled back into my routine, throwing myself into my duties with renewed focus. If I couldn't help Mom directly right now, I could at least continue building a stable life that could eventually support both of us. Friday night, Sarah and I had dinner together in my apartment, a weekly tradition we had established years ago. We ordered pizza, opened beers, and tried to focus on normal friendship things rather than the darkness hovering over my family situation. "You seem better tonight," Sarah observed as we cleaned up the dishes. "More like yourself." "I think I'm coming to terms with the fact that this is a marathon, not a sprint," I replied. "Mom has to want to leave. All I can do is keep the door open for when she's ready." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That's a healthy perspective. And meanwhile, you're putting together resources and building your own strength. That matters too." After Sarah left around 11 o'clock, I took a shower and prepared for bed. My apartment was small but comfortable, located in an off-base housing complex popular with single service members. It was on the second floor of a 3-story building with a security entrance downstairs that required a key fob for access. I fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the emotional drain of the past 2 weeks. The sound that woke me came just after midnight, a pounding on my door so forceful that the frame seemed to shake. My first thought was that it must be an emergency. Perhaps something had happened to someone in our unit. Half asleep, I stumbled to the door in my tank top and sleep shorts, not bothering to check the peephole in my haste. It was a mistake born of trust in the security of my building, one I would immediately regret. The moment I turned the deadbolt, the door burst open with explosive force, slamming into me and sending me staggering backward. Frank stood in the doorway, his massive frame silhouetted against the hallway light. His face was contorted with rage, his breath heavy with alcohol. The shock of seeing him paralyzed me for a crucial second. How had he found my apartment? How had he gotten past the building security? Before I could react, he charged forward, grabbing my throat and shoving me against the wall. "You thought you could turn my wife against me," he growled, spraying spittle as he shouted inches from my face. "You thought you could destroy my family?" My military training kicked in. I brought my arms up between his, breaking his grip on my throat, then delivered a sharp knee to his midsection. He stumbled back momentarily winded, and I used the opportunity to create distance between us. "Get out of my apartment right now," I commanded, reaching for my phone on the side table. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," he taunted, a disturbing smile spreading across his face. "But first, say hello to your mother." He stepped aside slightly, and that's when I saw her standing in the doorway. Mom looked hollow, her eyes vacant, her body rigid. She made no move to help me or to stop Frank. She simply stood there, a passive witness to the violence unfolding. "Mom," I called out, confusion overwhelming me. "What are you doing here? Are you okay?" She didn't respond. Frank laughed, a cruel sound that raised the hair on my arms. "She knows her place now. Took some convincing, but she understands what happens when people cross me." He lunged at me again, and this time I was ready. I sidestepped his charge, using his momentum against him, as I had been taught in combatives training. But Frank was not an opponent on a practice mat. He was fueled by rage and alcohol, making him unpredictable and dangerous. As I maneuvered around him, he grabbed a lamp from my desk and swung it wildly. I raised my arm to block. The blow, but the heavy base connected with my shoulder. Pain exploded through my arm as I felt something tear and pop. My right arm hung useless at my side. The shoulder clearly dislocated. "How does it feel?" Frank snarled, advancing on me again. "Not so tough now, are you, Sergeant?" I backed away, trying to put the couch between us, fighting through the pain to stay focused. "Mom," I called out again, desperately trying to break through her trance. "Help me. Call someone." Mom took a small step forward, then stopped as Frank whirled toward her. "Stay right there," he ordered. "Remember what I promised would happen if you interfered." Whatever threat he had made was enough to keep her rooted in place, her eyes now lowered to the floor. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain could. My own mother, watching as I was attacked, unable or unwilling to help. Frank turned back to me, knocking the coffee table aside as he came. I retreated toward the kitchen, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. My training had not prepared me for fighting one-handed against someone with Frank's size advantage, especially in the confined space of my apartment. He caught me before I could reach the kitchen, grabbing my injured arm and twisting it. The pain was blinding, sending black spots dancing across my vision. My knees buckled and I fell hard to the floor. Frank followed me down, pinning me with his weight. "You think you're so special with your uniform and your rank?" he spat, his face inches from mine. "But look at you now, pathetic, just like your mother." I struggled beneath him, but each movement sent fresh waves of agony through my dislocated shoulder. Frank gripped my hair, slamming my head against the hardwood floor. The impact dazed me, warm blood beginning to trickle from where my scalp had split. Through the haze of pain, I looked past Frank to where Mom still stood motionless in the doorway. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw something I had never expected. Nothing. No love, no concern, no recognition. Years of abuse had hollowed her out completely, leaving only an empty shell where my mother had once been. With my good arm, I reached desperately for anything within grasp. My fingers closed around my phone, which had fallen to the floor during the struggle. Frank was too busy gloating to notice as I unlocked it with my thumbprint. Sarah was always the first contact, our frequent communications putting her at the top of the list. With the last of my strength and focus, I typed 3 letters, SOS. The edges of my vision were darkening as I hit send. Frank's face above me began to blur and distort. The pain in my shoulder faded to a distant throb as consciousness started to slip away. The last thing I saw before blackness claimed me was my mother still standing in the doorway, her expression unchanged as she watched her husband try to kill her only child. Consciousness returned in fragments, disjointed and hazy. Beeping machines. The smell of antiseptic. Voices filtering through a fog of medication. My first coherent thought was surprise that I was alive at all. "She's waking up," a familiar voice said nearby. "Candace, can you hear me?" I forced my heavy eyelids open to see Sarah's concerned face hovering above me. Behind her stood Captain Reynolds, my company commander, his normally stern expression replaced with unusual concern. "What?" My throat felt raw, the single word scraping painfully as it emerged. "Don't try to talk yet," Sarah advised, placing a gentle hand on my uninjured arm. "You're in the hospital on base. You've been unconscious for almost 18 hours. Memories flooded back in a rush of terror. Frank breaking into my apartment, the attack, my mother's empty eyes. I tried to sit up, panic surging through me, but firm hands eased me back down. "Easy, Sergeant," Captain Reynolds said. "You're safe now. We've got you." A doctor appeared, checking my vitals and asking simple questions to assess my condition. I learned that I had a severe concussion, a dislocated shoulder that had required surgical repair, multiple contusions, and bruising around my throat consistent with strangulation. I was lucky, they said, that there had been no permanent damage to my trachea. When the doctor left, Sarah filled in the gaps in my memory. My SOS text had sent her racing to my apartment. She had arrived to find the door ajar and me unconscious on the floor, blood pooling beneath my head. Frank and my mother were gone. "I called emergency services and then Captain Reynolds," she explained. The military police responded within minutes, followed by the civilian police. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. The moment we confirmed this was an attack on a service member in her home, we activated every resource at our disposal, he said with quiet intensity. The MPs coordinated with local law enforcement. Your assailant did not get far. Frank, I managed to ask, my voice still a painful rasp. Apprehended at a motel 6 miles from base, he confirmed. Your mother was with him. Both are in custody. The news that Mom was also in custody sent a fresh wave of distress through me. Despite everything, she was still a victim, not a perpetrator. My mother, I whispered urgently. She's not responsible. He controls her completely. Sarah squeezed my hand reassuringly. The authorities understand that, Candace. She's being held primarily for her own protection and to get her proper psychological evaluation. They don't consider her an accomplice. Over the next few days, as my body began the slow process of healing, the full story emerged through visits from military police investigators, JAG officers, and my chain of command. Frank had forced Mom to reveal my address, which she had kept hidden in her gardening book along with the emergency resources I had left her years before. He had driven across the country with her, threatening harm to both of us if she attempted to warn me or escape. Hotel security footage showed him physically dragging her from the car at each stop. The attack on me had not been an impulsive act of rage, but a calculated attempt to silence what he saw as the source of threat to his control. He had planned it for days, even purchasing zip ties and duct tape found in his car, suggesting he might have intended worse than what actually occurred. What had saved me, beyond Sarah's quick response to my text, was the comprehensive military support system that immediately activated. Captain Reynolds had not simply delegated the matter to local law enforcement, but had personally overseen the coordination between military and civilian authorities. My squadron had rallied, with service members volunteering to guard my hospital room even though there was no credible ongoing threat. Colonel Winters, the base commander, visited me on the 3rd day, something virtually unheard of for a non-commissioned officer of my rank. He sat beside my bed, his presence both intimidating and reassuring. Sergeant Martinez, he began formally, what happened to you is unacceptable. An attack on one of our soldiers is an attack on the entire military family. I want you to know that every resource of this installation is available to you, from medical care to legal assistance to family advocacy services. His words struck a chord that resonated deeply. Family. The concept had been so distorted in my life that hearing it used in this context, to describe the military community surrounding me, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, sir, I managed to reply. No thanks necessary, he said. Firmly. This is who we are. We take care of our own. A week after the attack, still in the hospital but improving daily, I received the visit I had been both hoping for and dreading. A social worker named Miss Patel arrived with my mother in tow. Mom looked different than she had that night. Her eyes were clearer, her posture less hunched. She had been receiving treatment at a specialized facility for victims of domestic violence, where doctors had carefully weaned her off the anxiety medications Frank had insisted she take in increasingly high doses. Candace, she whispered when she saw me, her face crumpling with grief and remorse. Oh, Candace, I am so sorry. I had rehearsed what I would say to her, prepared accusations and questions that demanded answers, but seeing her, I found those words dissolving. Instead, I simply opened my uninjured arm, offering an embrace she didn't deserve, but that we both needed. She approached hesitantly, as if afraid I might withdraw the offer, then carefully hugged me, mindful of my injuries. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice thick with tears. I will never forgive myself for standing there, for not helping you. He had broken you down completely, I said, finding compassion where I had expected anger to be. That's what abusers do. They isolate, they manipulate, they threaten until there's nothing left of who you were. Miss Patel explained that Mom was suffering from a complex form of traumatic bonding and Stockholm Syndrome, conditions that would require long-term therapy to address. For now, she would remain in a secure treatment facility where she could begin healing without the fear of Frank's retaliation. The preliminary hearing for Frank's case came 2 weeks after the attack. By then, I had been discharged from the hospital, but was still on medical leave, my arm in a sling, my head still tender where stitches closed the wound from being slammed against the floor. The military had assigned a JAG officer to support me through the civilian proceedings, ensuring my rights as both a victim and a service member were protected. Captain Layton was a formidable presence in the courtroom, her uniform crisp, her manner professional, but with an underlying fierceness that was exactly what I needed. Frank barely glanced at me when he was brought in, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to diminish his once intimidating size. The charges were read: first-degree assault, attempted murder, breaking and entering, crossing state lines to commit a violent crime, and domestic violence against my mother, which had been added based on evidence collected during the follow-up investigation. The prosecutor presented hotel security footage showing Frank dragging my mother from the car, cell phone records of his threatening messages to me, and photographs of my injuries taken at the hospital. The judge denied bail, citing the severity of the charges and the risk Frank posed to both me and my mother. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the stand with a strange sense of calm. This man who had terrorized our family for years now sat small and powerless before me. I stood in my Army service uniform, my sergeant stripes visible on my sleeve, my injuries a testament to what I had survived. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady despite the discomfort in my throat, "the man before you did not just attack me physically. He spent years systematically destroying my mother's sense of self and safety. He isolated her from family, controlled every aspect of her life, and threatened her into compliance." I looked directly at Frank for the first time. But what he failed to understand is that when he attacked me, he did not just attack an individual. He attacked a United States Army sergeant. He attacked someone who is part of something much larger and stronger than himself. I went on to describe not just the physical assault, but the years of psychological torment he had inflicted on our family. I spoke not only for myself, but for my mother and for countless others trapped in similar situations without the support system I now had. I am standing here today because my military family responded when I needed them most, I concluded. I ask that this court show the same commitment to justice and protection. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Frank would remain in custody pending trial, with no possibility of contact with either me or my mother. Given the evidence and the nature of the charges, the prosecutor informed me that a plea deal was likely, one that would result in significant prison time without putting me through the trauma of a full trial. As we left the courtroom, Captain Layton placed a supportive hand on my good shoulder. "That was well done, Sergeant. Your testimony will help not just your case, but potentially others." Speaking truth to power takes courage. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to my life. Physical therapy for my shoulder. Counseling sessions to process the trauma. Regular visits with Mom at her treatment facility. Meetings with prosecutors as Frank's case moved through the system. Through it all, my unit supported me with a solidarity I had never experienced in civilian life. Sarah organized a meal train so I wouldn't have to cook while recovering. Fellow sergeants took turns driving me to medical appointments when I couldn't yet operate a vehicle. My first sergeant personally ensured that my medical leave did not affect my evaluation or promotion timeline. 3 months after the attack, Frank accepted a plea deal that sentenced him to 12 years in prison with no possibility of early parole. The prosecutor called to give me the news, explaining that the interstate nature of his crimes and the attack on military personnel had resulted in enhanced sentencing. That same week, Mom completed her initial intensive treatment program and moved into transitional housing provided by a domestic violence support organization. We began the slow, sometimes painful process of rebuilding our relationship, both of us in therapy, both learning to trust again. 6 months post-attack, my physical recovery was nearly complete. My shoulder would never have quite the same range of motion, but it was strong enough for me to return to full duty. The psychological healing took longer, but I found unexpected purpose in my experience. With my commander's blessing, I began working with the Family Advocacy Program on base, sharing my story with other service members dealing with domestic violence in their families. My first-hand understanding of both the victim's perspective and the military resources available made me uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between soldiers in need and the help available to them. What had begun as the worst night of my life had transformed into a mission I never anticipated, but embraced wholeheartedly. The military had saved me in more ways than one. First, by providing escape from Frank's household. Then, by literally saving my life the night of the attack, and finally, by giving me a community and purpose stronger than the trauma I had endured. 2 years have passed since the night Frank broke into my apartment. Time has a way of transforming even the most painful experiences into something we can carry without being crushed by their weight. My shoulder bears a surgical scar, a permanent reminder of that night, but it no longer limits my daily activities or military duties. The most profound healing, however, has been internal. Through consistent therapy and the unwavering support of my military family, I have moved beyond seeing myself as a victim to recognizing my role as a survivor and advocate. My experience, though traumatic, has become a powerful tool for helping others facing similar situations. Last month, I was promoted to Staff Sergeant, a milestone that felt especially meaningful given all that had happened. Captain Reynolds, who had been so instrumental in the aftermath of the attack, was there to pin my new rank insignia alongside my mother, a symbolic joining of my biological and chosen families. Mom has undergone a remarkable transformation of her own. After completing 18 months of intensive therapy, she secured a position as an administrative assistant at a local elementary school, slowly rebuilding her professional identity that Frank had systematically dismantled. She lives in her own apartment now, decorated with bright colors and filled with books, reclaiming passions long denied to her. Our relationship has required careful rebuilding, like setting a broken bone that must be properly aligned to heal correctly. There were difficult conversations about the night of the attack, about her inaction, about the years of enabling Frank's behavior. These discussions were painful but necessary, clearing away the festering wounds of unspoken truths. I didn't recognize myself anymore, she confessed during one particularly emotional session with our joint therapist. It was like watching everything through thick glass, feeling nothing, caring about nothing. Even my love for you, which had been the center of my world, became distant and unreal. Understanding the psychological mechanisms of coercive control helped me forgive her, recognizing that her apparent betrayal was itself a symptom of Frank's abuse. Forgiveness did not come easily or quickly, but it came, bringing with it a relationship deeper and more honest than what we had before. Frank remains in prison, 700 miles away, and completely removed from our lives except for occasional updates from victim services when he is denied parole. He has tried to send letters, which we have the right to refuse. His power over us diminished with each passing month until he became just a cautionary memory rather than an active threat. The military, which I once joined simply as an escape route, has become the foundation of my identity and purpose. 6 months ago, I helped establish a peer support program for service members affected by domestic violence, either in their families of origin or their current relationships. We named it Operation Safe Harbor, providing a space where soldiers can speak openly about experiences often shrouded in shame and silence. Through this program, I met Senior Airman Jessica Torres, whose stepfather had abused her mother for years before she enlisted to escape. Her story mirrored mine in so many ways that our first conversation lasted 5 hours, both of us experiencing the profound relief of being truly understood. I never thought anyone would get it, she told me, wiping away tears. Especially not someone in uniform. We're supposed to be strong, right? Invincible? Real strength, I replied, is not about being invincible. It's about falling apart completely and still finding a way to rebuild. That has become my mantra, the lesson I share with everyone who comes through our program. True resilience is not about avoiding damage, but about how we recover and grow stronger at the broken places. Last week, Mom joined me as a guest speaker at one of our support group meetings. It was her first time sharing her story publicly, her hands trembling as she described the gradual erosion of her identity under Frank's control. As she spoke, I watched the faces of those listening, saw the recognition dawn in their eyes. the silent nods of understanding. "The most dangerous thing about abuse," she said toward the end, "is how it convinces you that you deserve it. That this diminished version of life is all you are entitled to." It took my daughter nearly dying for me to finally see through that lie. After the meeting, a young corporal approached us, her eyes red from crying. "My mother is still with him," she said quietly. "Everything you described, it is like you have been living in our house. I don't know how to help her." Mom took the corporal's hands in hers. "Give her information, give her support, but most importantly, give her time," she advised. "Keep being the example of what freedom looks like. Sometimes seeing someone else break free is what finally makes escape feel possible." On the drive home, Mom turned to me with an expression of wonder. "Do you think we actually helped her?" "I know we did," I assured her. Even if her mother never leaves, that corporal now knows she is not alone, that what she experienced was not normal or acceptable. That knowledge alone is powerful. The following day, I received an email from my first sergeant informing me that our Operation Safe Harbor program was being considered for implementation across all Army installations. The validation of our work brought tears to my eyes as I sat at my desk, remembering the broken woman who had once lain bleeding on her apartment floor, wondering if she would ever feel whole again. This journey has taught me that family is not defined by blood or legal ties, but by who stands beside you in your darkest moments. My military family rushed to my aid when I sent that desperate SOS text. They guarded my hospital room, ensured justice was served, and supported my recovery in countless practical ways. They showed me what true family should be in the process, helping me redefine my understanding of love and loyalty. I have also learned that healing is rarely a solitary journey. Mom and I heal together, each step one of us takes forward, making it easier for the other to follow. The soldiers in our support program heal together, finding strength in shared experiences and collective resilience. Perhaps most importantly, I have learned that purpose can emerge from pain. The worst night of my life set me on a path I never would have chosen, but now would not trade. The work I do, helping other service members navigate the complicated intersection of military service and domestic violence, gives meaning to my experience, transforming personal trauma into professional purpose. Frank sought to silence me that night, to punish me for threatening his control. Instead, he amplified my voice, giving me a story that now helps others find their own courage to speak. This is perhaps the most fitting justice of all, that his attempt to destroy me ultimately made me stronger and more effective in combating the very type of abuse he perpetrated. As I look toward the future, I see endless possibilities for expanding our program, for reaching more service members trapped in cycles of violence, for creating the resources I wished had existed when I was that frightened teenager looking for escape. I see Mom continuing to reclaim her identity and independence, perhaps one day even helping other women navigate the complex journey out of abusive relationships. The uniform I wear represents more than just military service. It stands for breaking chains, finding true family, and the courage to rise again. What chains are you ready to break today? If my story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below about how you found your strength after difficult times, or simply to let others know they are not alone in their struggles. Together, we can build a community of survivors who lift each other up. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your darkest moment does not define you, but how you rise from it might just be your greatest legacy.